Hello and welcome to Music Ally Focus again with me, Music Ally's editor Joe Sparrow, and in this episode we have a glut of expert guests. We're joined by 4 experts from different areas of marketing, fan connection, direct-to-fan and artist-fan engagement to talk about the future of fan engagement and what fans and artists really need to do to connect with each other in the modern environment. We're thinking beyond the traditional funnel system, we're thinking beyond simple superfan strategies, we're looking at how to do it to build a solid connection and a solid income stream for the future. It's a fascinating and multifaceted conversation that was initiated from a guest post by Simon Scott, who's the founder and CEO of fan engagement technology company Push Entertainment. There's a link to that next to the podcast, and it might be worth reading it if you'd like to before listening any further, although we do ask Simon to explain it all at the beginning as well. And then we all jump in and explain, everyone explains their thoughts based on that starting point. All right, let's just get on with it and get straight into the conversation. Here we go. All right, I'm very happy to welcome to this, frankly, bustling Music Ally Focus, a swathe of expert guests. And we have, in alphabetic order, Aaron Bogucki, founder of direct-to-fan services company, Bogucki, Keziah, digital marketing manager on Artist Services UK at the digital music giant Believe. We have Robyn Elton, head of artist strategy audience at the agency Blackstar, and Simon Scott, founder and CEO of the fan engagement technology company Push Entertainment. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Joe.
Hello.
Hello.
Great to hear from you all. Now, I'll come back to you all in a moment. We're here to discuss the future of fandom and community and how that connects to music. Our springboard for this is an article that Simon wrote for Music Ally about music discovery and fan commitment. So I want to chat quickly to Simon first to set the context around there, what he's seen over his career in that space, and then we'll bring everyone else in fairly soon. So, Simon, that basic idea and the state of play, why did you write this article, which I'll link to beneath the podcast, and can you describe your thinking in a nutshell?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joe. Nice to be here. I think I wrote it really for 2 reasons. One was to sort of satisfy my inner geek, and the other one was really to keep myself sane. Really, I think I helped invent a product called Fan Pass, which is built on Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans philosophy, i.e. find the people who really care, and that's your foundation for building a lasting community. We've been in this world, or I've been in this world for about 30 years. So we put all of our experience in designing it, really focusing on 2 key questions. The first was, what interaction does the fan want? And what business model works for the music industry? And those principles really guided the design. We weren't really concerned about better CRM or data analytics to game the TikTok algorithm or anything like that. We kind of ignored those things, because over the years, I've seen those things being transitory. There's always something new that someone's bothered about. So we spent a lot of time going back to first principles and launching a product. We then sort of started talking to marketing teams. And sometimes those conversations were aligned, and sometimes we struggled to find common ground on some real basic stuff, like what it meant to be a fan and how fans feel. And that disconnect struck us as really odd, because we're all fans. You know, if you work in a technology company in the music industry, you've got to be a music fan, or else the pace of change is too much. The disconnect struck us as odd. And we started to notice other trends that didn't make sense at all. And the main one was that marketing teams would interchange the words an audience with a fan as if they were kind of like the same thing.
And what's the difference between them? Yeah.
Well, I think it's a difference in an approach. An audience is like a large group of people where you're trying to find some common denominator to drive them down to find your fans. And a fan is someone who's self-identifying as a fan. Yeah, they're just different things, you know. So, you know, they're just...
So sort of like someone who listens to an artist on Spotify in a playlist versus someone who will subscribe to their mailing list and hunt them down and buy stuff.
Well, I think that is kind of like a fan to a, for me, sort of like you've got like casual listeners, you've got fans, and you've got super fans,
Right.
if you like. But
Okay.
if you go and look at the job title of marketing people, when I started, they were all new media, then they were called online, then they were called digital. Then I think, where did you go from digital audience? Did you go from digital to audience? Yeah, you
I
went.
think that
Well, in
sounds
fact, no,
right. Yeah.
they went digital, and then they called you all marketing. And if you weren't digital, you weren't marketing. You had that shift, and then they became audience. And reality, the approach to an audience is different to the approach to a fan. Yeah, it's just like, because it's a different thing, the approach has to be different. And that sort of conversation we've just had was kind of like the really weird conversations that we had on many occasions. And we also noticed that most of the money was being spent trying to identify the fans from an audience, and not a lot of money was being spent on the fans trying to get them to engage more and maybe entice them to get more fans to be involved. So if you think about it, there was a top of the funnel approach. Money was being spent on top of the funnel and not being spent on the bottom of the funnel.
And that fan engagement thing is really key to what we're discussing today, isn't it? And also the future of this part of the industry.
But then Sleep Token happened. And by that, I mean, I was aware of them because one of the women in my team, her partner has worked with them for, 2 or 3 years. So they've been around in my orbit. And then I was aware, here are 4 guys, apparently from Surrey, who were the number 1 streaming album in America, Australia, the UK in the week of release. Yeah. To this day, I've not seen an article on it in Music Ally. I've not seen an article on them in the NME. Yeah. In fact, the only time that they bubbled, the Money Trench, all of those other people who purport to comment on the industry weren't talking about. And I'm going, well, if this was in 1975 and they were number 1 in America, it'd probably be the front page of the Sun with a picture of Matty Healy. So I couldn't understand that, really. That made no sense to me. And I thought, well, okay, is that because they're disconnected? And when I spoke to people about it, it's, oh, yeah, they do their own thing. They go and cultivate the fans. And I'm thinking, well, isn't that something that you want to do? And they would say, yeah, big artists do that, like Taylor Swift. And then I went and did research on Taylor Swift. And you research on Taylor Swift and you realize that she made the decision to capitalize some of the letters in the lyric sheet on her first album to give hidden meaning messages about the song to her audience.
And that's something innate for her, isn't it? She loves Easter eggs and bringing her audience
for
along.
her, and it's innate for Sleep Token, and it's innate for Radiohead, and it's kind of innate for Nine Inch Nails, which is why, Robyn, I'm really interested to have Robyn on this chat. And I'm going like, how do I reconcile these conflicting perspectives that don't make sense to me as a fan? And I thought, okay, I've got audience teams that work on data and science. I'm going to go and look at the science. And I'm definitely not a neuroscientist, yeah. And I'm definitely not a brain researcher in any way, it's a step of the way. But I spent a weekend just going, how does discovery work? How does discovery lead to connection? What does that mean? How can that be applied to music? I've always been a fundamental believer that technology, all it will really do is facilitate human behavior in a more direct way.
Right. And that's where it connects to engagement in the realist sense, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right, really.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like maybe if you approach it in a different way, then you can get some of the long-term relationships that you want to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was the start of it, really.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Well, I mean, that's a really good, in a nutshell, look at it, and I would encourage you to maybe even pause the podcast and go and read it and come back. The link is below the podcast. Let's then bring everyone else in, and with that in mind,
and this idea of what engagement is and how it relates to people and what people have to really do and what real engagement is. Perhaps we can look at some of the challenges that each of you individually face. I'm talking about you, Keziah, Robyn, and Aaron, and then we can sort of start talking about the future. So I'm going to go clockwise around my screen as I see you all. Robyn, what are the fundamental challenges around fan engagement for you?
Well, I think what Simon just said there was perfectly spot on, in the sense that the audience and the fan are two very different types of people. And I think, especially in our current music industry, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of going on, and there's a lot of, as well, I think, as Simon rightly pointed out, there is a bit of an obsession in marketing with like short-term success and short-term growth. Which I then think perpetuates that problem of how do you find those fans that deeply care, and how do you convert audiences into those fans that deeply care if you're kind of running away with the next thing that you need to jump on, the next feature of the platform that's been released, and so on. So I think there's so much in the challenges of needing to step back and pause for a minute and be like, okay, passive discovery leads to passive fans. They have a place, they have a purpose, they need to exist in your artist's fandom, but they can't be the only one-sided problem. That's a great question. I guess because it's quicker, to be honest. I think in this day and age where everything is so instantaneous and the speed of which everything is moving generally outside of music as well, I think we're always looking for those big viral views on TikTok videos and those quick, easy successes to be able to go to somebody and say, hey, look at how well this performed. It got 400,000 views when you normally get 20,000 views. And I think that also speaks a little bit to, the commodification of the algorithms have kind of triggered in, because now I've always said that to me, the most important thing is comments. If somebody takes the time and effort to comment their thoughts, that to me is worth 100,000 views. But obviously you see now in the back end of social media platforms, analytics are all about views. In reporting that we're doing, it's like, oh, you got 700,000 views, which equates to 1 to 3 seconds on a video, on a post these days. So I think it's a bit of a kind of chicken and egg scenario in that sense.
Yeah. Thanks, Robyn. Aaron, just to continue around my screen, I saw you nodding a lot there. What are your thoughts on what Robyn's just said, and like what are we looking for really in deeper relationships with fans?
Yeah, I think spot on, Robyn and Scott. Or Simon, sorry. I think there's a really, the vanity metrics are there because they make you feel good, right? Like it's a warm feeling to be like, I've got 1 million followers, or I've reached this many people. And that can be dangerous because you're kind of searching for like more moments or more viral moments to sort of get you sort of temporarily everywhere. But when the algorithm changes, you're losing out. And it's sort of, what are you doing with that connection or with that opportunity, right? It's sort of an audition to get in front of people, because when I think about artists that we work with and in the industry, it's important to get your art, your music, and yourself in front of people. And it's never been easier to do that, right? But at the same time, when you're reaching people, how are you showing them that there's an opportunity for a deeper connection with you as an artist, right? Because, hopefully your music is going to be doing the heavy lifting for you, right? It touches people emotionally, and the content you're creating is connecting with people or giving them an emotional connection. It's sort of inviting them into a deeper connection with you. And what does that look like, right? And we're working with artists, with our clients. I have a lot of empathy, because I've worked with artists for 20 years, talking to them about social media and anything else that was helping them connect through technology with their fans. And that's been really great and exciting to do. But it is a huge part of their job, right? I have empathy for the fact of like, you have to perform on social media. You have to create amazing music that connects with people. There's so many things you sort of have to do as an artist. And so this sort of taking it back to, you also have to have a deep connection with them, and you have to foster community, and you have to almost be like a community lead. Like, it's a lot, Yeah.
Yeah.
And some artists, as we said now, I think have, it's sort of innately built into them, but also, Taylor started when she was, a teenager, inviting people into her apartment to play songs for her. Right. Like that was started early. And so she sort of built that muscle, right. And that energy around herself and made it part of her brand and plays with her fans in that way. And we saw that this week with the launch as well. There's some really interesting Easter eggs that came out of that, even from last year that she was planning. Right. So this is the thing. Not every artist is going to be a Taylor Swift. That's okay. But you have to think about, okay, what aspect of my art, my personality, and who am I as an artist, can I show people more of and build something around that, right? And so this is the thing, it takes a lot of effort, it takes energy, it takes a team sometimes to help you foster that. And I think that can be a real challenge, right? It's like I've got to be everything to everybody on top of the funnel, but I've also had foster a deeper connection, and that can be a challenge, I think, for a lot of artists coming in.
Speaking of that team, Keziah, your job is to is to try and get the balance right here. You need to get those big numbers. I guess there's pressure on you to do that, but you also need to make fans feel deeply connected and do it in a way that works along the lines we're saying. So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you experience that?
Yeah, it might sound like a bit of a cliche, but I always try and make sure we're trying to create more of a movement rather than a moment. I know Robyn and Aaron focused on that just now, but because there's such a sort of overly saturated market with content, and I hope that doesn't sound bad as a digital marketing manager, but it's true. There's so much content, there's so much being put out every day, and there are so many songs being put out every day on streaming platforms. So I think the key issue is fatigue, really, and I think diminishing attention spans as well. And I think there seems to be a catch-22 of sort of being aware of the benefits of social media platforms and being reliant on these social media platforms for engaging fan bases, particularly for developing artists. But then, whilst also being too reliant on these platforms, it can create challenges of, like I said, like feeling super fatigued, feeling overwhelmed. Aaron spoke about having empathy for artists. I completely agree. It's difficult. It's especially if perhaps you are an artist who is a bit more introverted, a bit more private. You're not used to trying to share every element of your life and sort of commodify it in a way to translate into engagement. It's hard. I think challenges like the brief TikTok ban in America, for example. I mean, I know it lasted 2 days in the end, but I know the whole industry was quite afraid, and it kind of illuminated how much emphasis we put on TikTok and how reliant we are on short form content platforms. And it highlighted the need for considering alternative means of engaging fans.
Which again, sort of speaks to the point of short-termism, doesn't it? Which I think you've all spoken to in a sense, and over-reliance on platforms is something which has become a feature of a lot of elements of the industry in recent years. And what we're trying to talk about here is how to navigate a difficult change, which is maybe that over-reliance on, I'm going to sort of roughly call it shallow engagement, with deeper engagement, but that takes a lot more legwork. Simon, let's come back to you here. And look forwards instead. So we've spoken about algorithmic suggestion, reliance on platforms. Younger generations still engage in what we're calling earned music discoveries. So what does this say about that? We've talked a lot about like artists and marketing, but what about the fans? What does it say about their emotional investment in music?
I think that the emotional investment, I don't really believe comes from the music. The emotional investment comes from what the music does to you, which is a little bit different, really. And I think that the emotional investment comes from the information that is laid out in front of you that enables you to uncover things for yourself, and to discover. It's, and I think that where there's a miss is that, let's take, my favorite band of the moment is Fontaine's DC. if I'm the Fontaine's DC audience manager, the fact that they didn't play a particular song at a show in Cardiff that they played at Finsbury Park within a week of each other is probably not something that I think is really of a lot of use to the audience. So I probably wouldn't even think about understanding that. I'm probably not even looking at the set list to understand what the band are doing. Yeah. But for a fan, I really want to know. Yeah. If I'm an audience person, I'm probably talking about 45,000 people and got from Vox Pops of people saying how great they are. But I'm probably not thinking about the video where 45,000 people are inhaling as part of a community during Starburster. That's probably not making my radar. Yeah. So I think that it's like, for me, the answer is simple in a way. It's think as a fan, put information out there that a fan would want. People will get emotionally invested if they're going to get emotionally invested. You can't force someone to get emotionally invested. They're going to get emotionally invested or they're not. Yeah. In fact, probably if it's too much of a massive thundering herd of content, yeah, you're probably going to turn off some of the people who like to be able to discover things themselves, because, breaking an act can't be any different to breaking a fashion item, fashion brands, off exclusive. You got to just think about laying it out to let people get emotionally connected.
I mean, you're right, and that's a simple approach, right, or a simple idea. But of course, those simple ideas are often the hardest to implement because they are fundamental. And what you're saying rings true as a fan, right? I think we can all.
Well, I think that goes back to Aaron. Someone said vanity metrics.
Yeah, it was Aaron.
Yeah. I mean, I've sat in nowhere near as many label meetings as these guys. Yeah. But you see the people in the room who don't want to talk about the numbers that they've got, that they're, because they're not very large. So they're not going, we got 10 people last week. We don't know why, but they're all from Birmingham. But we got 10 people. Everyone is going hundreds of thousands, 400,000. That person with 10 people in Birmingham, there's something going on there. Yeah, but it's not really discussed in an open thing. And okay, 10, how do we make that 20 next week? Because right back when, one of the early lessons that I learned was to get from 0 to 10 takes as much effort as 10 to 100, as much effort as 100 to 1,000, as much effort from 1,000 to 10,000. But the effort is spent from getting to 1 million to try and find the 1,000, not from trying to find the 10 and get them up to the 1,000. So for me, that basically base understanding, it's not fear. I don't think it's fear. That's not the word. Is
it lack of confidence in, like, believing in the growth, or what is it?
It might be fear of failure. Yeah. It might be that. Do you know what I mean? It might be fear of being the odd one out. It might be that the compensation metrics and length of term of the contracts and those things don't encourage people to think in the right way. It might be the reason why you find really interesting long-term stuff happening with the sort of work that Robyn does with 9 Inch Nails, or I know that Aaron is doing with the Swell Season and other people that he's working with. It might be that that's got to be closer to the manager. It might just be really, really difficult in a group of marketing people that are funded by a major label to be able to take the time in order to build it. I'm not close enough to that. This is part of the reason why I wanted these guys, because they know. Yeah, I don't know. I just observe.
Yes. Well, let's go to Aaron then, because he did mention vanity metrics earlier and has probably had to deliver these kind of metrics, or at least parse them quite often. First of all, well, two things. What's your take on this vanity metrics situation, the chasing the big numbers, and how do we get beyond that? What is it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I think we're all stuck in the old marketing funnel, first of all. And if people that worked with me, I talk a lot about the funnel.
Can you briefly explain the old one versus the new one?
So essentially, we're all living in it, and we're all slaves to it. And marketing, it starts at the top: awareness, saturating awareness, spending a lot of money at the top of the funnel on radio and TV and whatever it is, that reaches the most audience, right? And then you get some interest, and you hopefully your connections with people, and then there's some desire there. Okay, I'm really into this, and now there's some action. I'm going to purchase this. I'm going to stream this. I'm going to buy a ticket, right? So it's sort of top down. It's very much about saturating awareness and spending a lot of time in ubiquity, right? And try to be ubiquitous and big artists like that, right? So, and it's still important. Like, getting awareness is important. I mean, it's incredibly saturated market, not just for music, but just content, right? It's insane. So understanding that, right? But then moving into, there was some really great research that came out sort of top of last year around how the Gen Z broke the marketing funnel. And we use this a lot in our strategy, right? Because a lot of the artists we're working with are seeking Gen Z audiences. But they've really flipped it, right? It's very much about for these fans and this generation. There's no friction, right? There's no friction to finding new things, or they don't. They've just been super served content at such a scale that finding friction is a good thing, right? They want to earn things. They want to feel like they're experiencing something a bit more interesting than just being fed stuff. And so when you look at this research, and I wish I could quote it, and maybe you can put it in the article later, Joe, but it starts at the top. It starts with inspiring them. That Gen Z want to be inspired, right? They want to feel inspiration. They want to feel that. They want to explore is the next thing. Rather than saying generate interest, they want to explore. Give them some layers to dig into. On your socials is the first place they're probably going to look. I dare to say websites, right? And other areas of your owned properties. Give them some things to explore, to uncover. And then there's community below that. They want to feel part of something, not only artists, but like brands and causes. And it's important to feel like I'm part of something. And not only am I connected with that artist, but they want to connect with each other. That's what true community is about. When we talked earlier about audiences very much one to many, a mailing list, a social follower, right? That's an audience, right? Community is about not only connection between the fan and the artist, but fan to fan is even more important in that situation, right? So what we're getting to here, instead of action and sales, we're getting to loyalty, right? And so loyalty is the currency we're dealing with now. And the more that you can foster that, the better long-term business you're going to have. And what's really interesting in this research is that it didn't just stop there. You have to go back to the top, keep inspiring them, keep giving them things to explore, keep bringing community. And it's a cycle. It doesn't stop at a transaction. And so when you're at in a label team or these sort of environments where, you have a marketing budget, you have a timeline and a plan that's really well considered. Sometimes that longer term loyalty takes, maybe you have to start 3 or 6 months before you even start your campaign to start building that. Maybe it's after your campaign that you need to keep fostering that, so that your next album or your next release or your tour has, bears more fruit. This is a long-term investment. And so I think that can cause, friction just in the systems that we're all kind of existing within.
I was going to say that does require a lot of buy-in, doesn't it, and faith, and that is obviously, when you're under time pressure, is a hard thing to have. Just quickly, Aaron, how would you then, you've built this, let's say, authentic sort of group of people who are there authentically and they're buying into it and they believe in it. I guess that's the point when you turn it into tangible outcomes. Like, how do you do that? Is it I presume you've got to resist the same old strategies of suddenly spamming them with stuff to buy.
Yeah, and let's be honest, like our clients and across the industry, it is kind of go, okay, how do I get to a commercial end of this? Like, how can I measure the impact here, right? Because let's be honest, like if you have a viral moment on TikTok, you can pretty much measure that in streams, right? And that means revenue, right? So not discounting that whatsoever. But yeah, it's sort of, we try to work with our clients on kind of getting to the commercial conversation. Like, and when we talk about eCRM, one of my sort of cheesy catchphrases lately is like, we all forgot the R in CRM, the relationship side of it. We treat these channels as transactional ATM-like experiences. And so, we've had some really great success with clients like, White Lies, where, we launched a fan club with them, and they already had a fan club. We relaunched it with them, and we had a really strong group of core fans that were paying to engage with the band, who were very engaged with their fan base. But around different moments in the year, we had commercial moments that tied into the narrative that we had with the community. And so, the band are doing, Fantasy Premier League with their fans, which is really fun. And we launched a football kit around that, and it was the highest selling merch item of the year. And so it's about kind of finding commerce and finding KPIs that you care about, that, there's a commercial side of KPIs, but then there's the sort of intangible, sort of softer KPIs that are sometimes maybe deemed as less valuable. And it's trying to assign a value to those and knowing that, like, and how they feed your business. Right. And so one thing, again, I'll wrap up in a second, but artists who, if we're fostering deep community and deep connection, I'm seeing, for Lovecat, one of our great clients through AWOL, like, I mean, every time I go on Instagram, there's like a new fan account popping up. And like, we normally wouldn't have, like 3 years ago, maybe people would care about it, but you wouldn't really think that that's something we need to measure. But that's a really tangible sign of sticky fandom. And we try to foster that, with our clients and with our partners.
I think that, I found the research, I think, Aaron, that you're referring to. It's about brand trust. But it basically says that 70% of Gen Zs and 69% of millennials only trust a brand after carrying out their own research.
Yep.
Yeah. So when you go, what does the music industry put out there for fans to go and carry out their own research? The fan ends up on Wikipedia if they're carrying out their own research, basically, because there's nowhere else to go. Yeah. And or the event board that lives at the top of Google Analytics. How much time do different agencies think about the words that are being used and the images that are used in the Google Analytics card? I don't know. I don't have a lot of conversations about it when I'm talking to people. I'm sure enlightened people do. So it's like the behaviors are there, but the information isn't there to enable people to connect. I think it's my overall.
Speaking of enlightened people, Keziah.
I was just going to add that, like, I'm sure it has been covered, but obviously Gen Z and Gen Alpha are really sort of seeking connection, and I think they sort of see music artists as public figures, and I think there's been a real shift over the years towards that, because I think these generations are able to discern between, I suppose, earned media, like paid posts, and then organic posts. They want to feel like they have built their own rapport with their favorite artists, and then that makes them go and do the extra research, checks out the Wikipedia pages, but they want to see who their favorite artist is, I suppose, on their own channels, I suppose.
I mean, Keziah, you mentioned earlier this idea of artists sharing and some of them not wanting to share. And that comes down as a sort of fairly personal decision by artists based on how they feel and how they interact with the world. And you mentioned there, of course, and we've all seen this, that there is a sense of this being a public figure, ownership of an artist by fandoms. And that's a very difficult tension, isn't it? Because that latter thing is often used to drive connectivity, engagement, and sales, right? So how do you cross that bridge as someone who works closely with artists and tries to connect with fans? They need to share something, but they may not want to share everything or much at all. How do you, and yet it's sort of demanded by this what we're talking about. So how do you solve that problem?
It's like self-perpetuating, isn't it? I think I mentioned earlier, it depends on the artist, and I think some artists are just naturally more private. They don't want to share elements of their social lives or their personal lives with fans, but yet they still want to form that connection. So I think it's important on our side of things to come up with strategies that still enable them to build that rapport, but that limit the artist's participation so that they can still sort of focus on their art. So I think Aaron mentioned things like fan accounts. They're popping up left, right, and center. Things like burner accounts, strategies like creator marketing, but doing it in a way that seems as organic as possible, I suppose. So if your artist, perhaps it might seem obvious if your artist isn't a huge dancer, but you're trying to create a dance trend with a song that they've put out, that's not going to translate well with the fans that you have or the audience that you have. So coming up with strategies that literally make sense, but relying on things that aren't just the artist having to put themselves out there is super important and becoming more important as time goes on.
Thanks. Yeah, Robyn, I'm keen to come to you to talk about this idea of positive friction, or this where artists are using Easter eggs, or they're building a world, or they're building this sort of paths that fans can explore that sort of builds loyalty, not in an artificial way. It's like it's you're building the story. Can you give me your thoughts on that, and maybe some examples of how it can work well?
Yeah, and I think what Keziah was saying there, like everything sort of, it's the intention behind what you're doing can be that authentic thing, and that can be seen in everything. And I'm very lucky in the type of artists that I work with are a bit of that anti-marketing framework and how they think, and they sort of keep me on my toes in the sense where I go, well, this is best practice, and they're like, but why do I have to do that? And I go, yeah, actually, why do you have to do that? And I think the positive friction is great, and we've literally just had it, like, this is quite well timed because we've literally just had it with Hayley Williams, and being in meetings with her where she's like, I'm going to drop 17 songs, and everyone's like, God, how do we put that on Spotify if it's not an album, if it's not a body of work? How do we get that? How do we make that? And then do we do a Spotify canvas for each one? No, I don't want to do Spotify canvases. And your sort of best practice brain is kind of blowing up a little bit. But then you're like, oh, yeah, actually, some of these things we just do because it's common practice to do. And I think like the positive friction, like for me, we've done a study with BPI and Lemon Tank on Gen Z. And the sort of large and part of it is that they actively engage in both algorithmic suggestion, which obviously offers that access, but then also this earned discovery that Simon's obviously kicked off of all of us through that depth. And I think like positive friction in my mind absolutely has place and will continue to have place in music discovery. Like fans crave challenge, it pulls them in, it rewards them mentally, like your brain kind of remembers those things that you worked to figure out and you worked to get to. And Simon's brought it up already, but we worked with 9 Inch Nails, and ahead of announcing the Tron soundtrack and the new song, the guys are on tour, and as part of the merchandise, they had a lyric t-shirt, and every 3 or 4 dates the lyric on that t-shirt would change. And in the final 4 dates of the European tour, the lyrics were from the new upcoming Tron song, but we hadn't told anyone that at all. We just sort of dropped a message to the Discord mods who run a fan Discord account, like, hey, when people are sharing their merch posts in the Discord, can you just give us a hint if anyone starts sharing this lyric tee? And it wasn't a case of like then putting it out blast and showing everyone, look what we're doing. It was, we just genuinely wanted to see if people picked up on it. So I think and I think that works for everyone. I know obviously we've spoken a lot about established artists, but I think there is that model, like in this model, I think emerging artists can thrive because fans do want to find something early. They want to help an artist grow. They want to be a part of their journey. So I think like positive friction from a Hayley Williams down to, a completely unknown act, Punchbag, well, actually they're not unknown, but Punchbag, like I think they can all play with positive friction, which will help build loyalty.
And I guess the takeaway here is that like, if you're not sort of adjacent to these artists doing this, you might not even hear about it. Like, but all of the fans of that artist will definitely hear about it and be excited, and it will sort of bring the people closest into that. But maybe not the people all the way over here because you're not just blasting things out to everybody. Simon,
but you're building the core of people who care. So, if Robyn's got 20 people talking about the fact that those are the lyrics of the Tron track and sharing about it and talking to friends about it and getting the word of mouth out that 9 Inch Nails are doing something, that's going to be equivalent to a number of people that you'd go and get on a social post, whether that's like, 20,000 people or 200,000 people, I don't know, but there's an equivalence there. There's an equivalence there. And I think it's back to the point earlier on, the fear of talking about the low number equivalence or the embarrassment or whatever the word is, that might be the inhibiting thing. Trust me, if you're in Coca-Cola and you're launching a new drink Everyone's celebrating when they sell their first slab in the test market. They're not going, oh my God, we've just sold one slab of cans. They're going, right, why did they buy that? Let's go and dig into it. Let's go and understand what happened. Let's go and replicate it.
Well, let's talk about that, Simon, as we sort of move into the future. I've got some sort of more specific questions for everybody in a minute in their fields of expertise. But I'm quite interested in what you just said then, which is, okay, what are the signals then? If this is about having confidence in what you're doing and not defaulting to the giant numbers in the future, what are the sort of one slab of cans of Coca-Cola signals that teams can feel confident about when they see them?
Wow. What would I be looking for? I would be putting out, I would put out information rather than content. And I would see how people reacted to information.
What do you mean by that, just for clarity for someone?
Well, we spent a lot of time in the influencer world working with people like Alfie Days and Joe Sugg in the early days of when all of that went off in the influencer world. And we used to watch these people growing, and we used to run e-commerce stores for them. And you would see that the fans were getting off on the information that was hidden behind the medium of a photo. So there wasn't a post going, here's me with my new boyfriend holding a Prada handbag on holiday in Greece. They weren't spoon feeding. They were going, here's a photo. And the fans are going, is that the new Prada handbag? Where are they? Who's the shadow of the person I can see? You were giving them information that enabled them to have a conversation. Yeah. And so I would be going, what reaction do I get? Do I have a fan base that is interested in information? Yeah. So for Robyn, it would be on the merchandising stand, what's the percentage of sales of a Lyric t-shirt against one that's got a logo of the band? Yeah. An early adopter of the band, who is someone who's going to passionately care about them, is more likely to buy a Lyric t-shirt than one with the logo of the band. Yeah. So I would be doing alternative strategies that were targeted at fans to enable you to understand if you've got any bite there at all. I think. Yeah. That would be one thing off the top of my head.
All right. Keziah, I just want to start with you this time then. How do you feel about that? Because again, I'm picking on you a bit here to say that you're the one under the pressure for numbers and etc. But like it's that is the reality of positions like yours. Well, first of all, what do you think of Simon's idea of being able to convince everyone involved are looking for these kind of signals rather than slapping a big number on the table and taking the rest of the day off?
I was thinking while Simon was talking, just we visited this notion already, but just the idea of building communities. And I was thinking about just how important it is to build different communities. Not every fan will be interested in exactly the same thing as like every other fan. Having like niches, I suppose, and cultivating those communities so you can tap into them when you're releasing music, when you're not releasing music. I think in terms of the future, in terms of now, I suppose, and I suppose always, I think honing in on the idea of community building with your fans is as important as ever. That's something that was just ringing in my head whilst Simon was speaking.
That's about connecting people with each other, right? And so
exactly.
Looking into the future, what are the, it's easy to get distracted by platforms and say, Discord, WhatsApp, whatever. But what are the sort of fundamental tenets when you're talking about building a community that enjoys being with each other and then connects to an artist and does all this stuff that we're talking about?
We've got to give them opportunities to connect with each other. So Discord is great for that. And sometimes you can even ask fans to be moderators of a subgroup. And that's a very easy win. It's a good win. And it then sort of perpetuates itself. I think that's a strong strategy there.
And does that fit into what we spoke about in terms of perhaps artists not putting too much pressure on artists to have to share? It allows. Is that one way of getting a sort of middle ground there?
Definitely. I think platforms like that, decentralized platforms, allow artists to tap in when they want to, if they feel they need to, or you could have a member of the team, internally or externally, helping to manage that. It allows artists a sort of agency, I suppose, that if they want to be involved, they can. If they want to really step in and encourage fans to connect with each other, they can. And if not, like I said, moderators can definitely help there.
Robyn, going back to this idea of what fans, looking into the future, what fans really want. We've seen platforms. It's easy to sort of say, certain platforms have shortened attention spans of consumers of everything, and we've created a culture of skim engagement of 2 seconds of swiping and moving on with. And we're talking about arts and culture here. This is something important that historically requires deeper engagement than 2 seconds. And what we're saying here is that in the future, the premise here is that deeper engaging behavior is where long-term satisfaction and success lies. What are you doing then to get to that point where you're finding a happy medium between fast-moving content and stuff that really makes a difference in that deeper sense?
Yeah, I think going back to something that Aaron said earlier, it's the concept of the sticky fans, and keeping them engaged. And I think making sure, exactly the same as what Keziah just said, like treating everyone as their own individual. Everyone's not all going to engage in something that you think they will engage in. And I think it's important to kind of keep that open mind and think to yourself also, it's like, yes, okay, let's say we've had a really successful video, we've got loads of views and a little flurry of new followers through YouTube Shorts or Reels or TikTok or however that means, but always kind of questioning that and being like, okay, after that, where did they go? Where did the fan go? Did they go through the profile and dig deeper into the artist themselves, or did they jump onto Google, as Simon mentioned, and go straight to the number one, which is 9 times out of 10 Wikipedia, which is probably the unsexy part of my job, but I still find it incredibly important to keep updated. What did they do next? And like, have we given them something to invite them further? Like, what have we given them off the back of that view to get them in there? And I think what Keziah was saying just then as well, it's like giving those opportunities. If we build just artist to fan bridges, we're going to have tired artists, one-way conversations between the individual fan and artist, and everyone's going to be running around like a headless chicken. So making sure that we're building those fan-to-fan spaces takes the pressure off the artist and also allows the fan to do their own thing. So we're giving them more opportunity, and then getting to a good place, like Keziah said, where maybe you've got like an individual team member or a mod, or you've buddied up with a fan who is part of the team to a degree and knows the kind of do's and don'ts and the rules and regulations, to just let them be. I think sometimes we also have a bit of an obsession of tracking everything. And I'm like, you know what? There's a subreddit over there that has been running for years that the artist or the band has never touched. Why are we now going to be like, oh, we're going to make this an official subreddit and the artist is going to get involved? Sometimes we don't need to own every single fan interaction. And I know that shoot the messenger as a head of audience artist strategy. But, I think what everyone's been saying, but Simon at the very beginning is like, we're fans, and what makes us tick or what itches that part of our brain isn't the same for other people. And it's just having that open mind with everything as well, so that you can go into a meeting and be like, 10 people in this pub bought this CD at a pop-up on a pint or whatever. And then somebody over there can say, we got 4 million views across the short form this month. And they both equate to like the same goal of success. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but.
No, useful. Oh no, go on. I'll keep this in. Go on. Very well. Can we take a moment to appreciate that the way of getting a photograph onto the internet 30 years ago was by mailing in a Polaroid to someone? That's remarkable.
£10,000 of our own money doing the broadcast.
And which year was this, Simon? Just for
1996. We got paid $500 by Noel Gallagher. Okay, but we spent 10 grand of our own money because we kind of felt like, right, we're going to go and try and make a bit of history, and it's going to be a riot. Tour bus, 12 people, Loch Lomond. I mean, that's just going to be a lot of fun. 29 or 30, that's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah, we did the decamp. And we spoke to the audio company, and only a few thousand people listened to it. We were just distraught. You know, it would cost like more than well, it was like more than £1 a listen. It cost us. Yeah. All right. 6 or 8 weeks later, we got a telephone call being asked to take the stream down because over 600,000 people had listened to the stream. All right. That's pre-MySpace. That's pre-Facebook. That's pre-Instagram. That's pre-TikTok. That's pre any of it. Yeah. The fans had self-organised on weird little bulletin boards, on MSN messengers and stuff like that. So that, for me, is, okay, put it out there. If fans care, they'll self-organise. If they don't care, work out what you can do to make them care. Because if they care, they'll self-organise. Like, the audience job is to expose what's going to make them care. What is in the innate being of, the majority of these people, and they're lovely people. I'm not as fortunate to have met as many artists as these guys, but they're creative. They've got an essence that they're trying to communicate. That is going to connect with a subset. Well, it's definitely connected with the A&R person. And it definitely connects. So just make that essence available and give, to Robyn's point, give people the time to connect, give them the time to self-organize. Don't force it. I think.
Final question, Simon. Did Noel Gallagher pay you the remaining £9,500?
No. But we had like 2 real audio streams, which is like we started with 2 ISDN lines. That is 1 to 8K to give you some idea, and then we had a real audio server that was streaming the audio, and then we had some See You See Me cameras that were webcams that would take a photo every 10 seconds. And then we wrote the first ever HTML ticker tape program where we could write in a comment and it would scroll it across the top of the screen. Yeah. So we would basically have people typing out, oh, Noel's coming, Noel's doing this, Liam's doing this. We went out with a digital camera and someone recording stuff and then bringing that back and transcribing it onto a laptop and uploading it. You know what I mean? It was like we created something. We didn't get the money, but it's
that's a Tate Modern art piece, what you've just explained there. I think
Honestly,
I saw that last week.
Yeah.
You didn't get the money, Simon, but you've got a story, and that's probably the best thing you could have hoped for that investment, I think.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's like you go, oh, okay, but you learn that fundamental lesson.
Aaron, to bring you back in, your name and Sticky Fans has been mentioned a few times in connection, so I'm interested in how that works together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Everyone's thoughts are spot on, and I think one thing that has been slightly missing from the points is fundamentally it's about making fans feel seen, right? In every way, right? Like, so it doesn't have to be, what Chaperone does, which is incredible, which is, we're all going to dress up like this at the show. We're this is us together doing this thing, and we're participating together. It's finding that version of that for who you are as an artist, right? And what does it mean to be feel seen by that artist in your world, right? So, am I looking at, the fans? First of all, these artists, they see the fans who come to the shows all the time. That's the first thing, and going, hey, wow, I recognize you. Hey, come over here, get my team to grab you, and we're going to have a chat. And I know a lot of great artists, today, they spend hours after shows signing autographs and speaking to fans. And so that's the first step. But I think, it's making them feel seen. And I love the ideas of sort of getting out of their way as well. We're working on that in our teams as well. And how do we create a really valuable liaison between that fan base and that artist and foster that and super serve them. But also what we really focus on as well and try to get right is being fan-led. What does that mean? How do you let them just get on and be creative? We had a really great brainstorm with the fandom community yesterday. And we were bringing some ideas to them. But, in the debrief with my team this morning, we were talking about it, and it was like the best way of us sort of having that conversation was just very open questions and letting them be creative and letting them come up with ideas and things like that, where as opposed to what do you think of this or what do you think of that, right? And so, getting out of their way and meeting them where they are and making them feel seen. I think the other things, and Simon and I talk about this as well. We've talked about we had a little '90s throwback here, and I'll date myself on this as well. But one of my catchphrases, and Simon, we were talking about this, is like the old shit's the new shit again, right? Like, so if you didn't have social media, right, post 2005, 06 or whatever, when we were all on MySpace and Bebos and all that fun stuff in those mid-noughties, take that all away. And again, going back to my fandom in the 90s and late 90s, I was on the forums with my favorite band, sharing stuff. I was a massive Verve fan. And I remember when they played the Hey Hall gig, a fan from Wigan had taped it on the BBC and posted that to me, right? And that was amazing to me because I couldn't get the BBC in Michigan, right? So I was on those things. And then I remember Radiohead recording Kid A and on their website, on their .com, I was there every week working out what Ed had uploaded in his studio diary, what photos, it was so cryptic and interesting, but I didn't have social media to go find things. I had to go to the .com, join the mailing list, go to the forum, those sort of, staple of an artist's own platforms. That's really come back to becoming the focal point of where you need to be. Sorry, Simon. You're
no. Those are positive actions. In the modern world, those things are seen as friction.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Everyone goes, we don't want them to go and sign an email list to go and read the article. We don't want to take them off the socials to go to the website. But those things, I think, are the friction that cause the connection, basically.
Exactly. Going and spending time and so it's finding the way of combining those in your own strategy, I think really is where you can find success.
All right. I think we're nearly out of time. But quickly, perhaps we can go around the group and say sort of one final question, 30 seconds each. For people who are listening and think this is sparking ideas in their heads, and they may be working at a DIY level, and they may be working at a big artist level. And what can you all suggest one thing that they can do that can immediately initiate some sort of change along this path? And let's start with you, Robyn.
Yeah, I guess my one thing would be like avoid being one note. I think going back to what Simon was saying, like don't just serve content, have fun, experiment, make kind of music discovery fun, however that looks. And it's hard to, because I think this is the number one thing that I see with artists, especially who have like built up such a great following on their own through TikTok or however that looks. Like, don't be disheartened by the vanity metrics. Kind of learn from them, figure it out, and keep it true to you and your fan base. So yeah, I think I'd just say like avoid being one note, mix it up, have fun.
Okay. Great, thanks, Keziah.
I would say it might seem obvious, and I think we've spoken about it throughout, but try to think from a fan perspective. I think instead of solely from a music industry specialist perspective, like think as a consumer, like we are all consumers. So think like what do I best respond to? Like what kind of content makes me feel fatigued? Like what would make me click on a song or attend an event or buy a record or other pieces of merch? I think we've sometimes we can become in this industry, we can become quite detached from the activations and the strategies that we're actually putting out. And I think just remembering, like, or thinking if it's something that you as a fan yourself wouldn't see immense value in, then question like why it is that you're doing it and if there could be another way to do it. Yeah. And I would say always question the cultural context of the artists that you're working with. I think that's super important. The different cultural frameworks.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. And Aaron, let's go to you next.
Yeah. I think apart from, like I said earlier, making your fans feel seen is very important and finding your way of doing that. Beyond that, fans are more than just a number in your follower list, right? Or on your subscriber list. They're real people. And it's worthwhile. One of the first things I started doing when I've started, Big Cookie was let's just go ask the fans, right? Like whether it's you as the artist or it's someone in your team or whatever, like really reaching out to them and going, how did you find me? Like, and I know it's a little bit corny, maybe you're a new artist to do this, by the way. So I know it's not easy, but just really kind of getting to know what's in your sort of fandom DNA. Like what about you are they attracted to and connected with, with your music and beyond. But do the work and really kind of go beyond just collecting followers and numbers and really kind of starting to get into them and their psyche. And that will help you become inspired as to like what you can create in experiences and online and offline. And it will help you understand and help you. And again, going back to the Taylor Swift example, it's like building that muscle of like direct fan engagement, understanding, and making that part of who you are as an artist in your own way. And it's just like practicing social media or practicing an instrument. It's like really kind of understanding who your fans are, I think is really important, and taking the time to meet them on a personal level can go really far. I mean, look at the fans in your queue outside your show. Maybe there's a way of doing some really interesting way of collecting insights from them, right? From your team. I don't know, right? We do Vox Pops on camera with some of our clients in the queues and finding out, if they're part of the Discord or how do they find this artist or, it takes a bit of research to do that. And it definitely brings some really creative ideas out on the other side. So.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. And we're back where we started then, Simon.
Yeah. Experiment with random acts of kindness, I think that's what I would do, and just see where they lead. Yeah. So if you're going to go and spend £1,000 on digital marketing, take £500 of it and give the first 50 people who buy a t-shirt from the e-commerce store £10 off. Don't advertise it. Don't tell them about it. Don't drive them to it. Just let them know, oh, by the way, the artists are giving you £10 off this. We really appreciate you. And see where that leads virally. Yeah, see what communication you get from that, and just try and measure that. What's the difference in the revenue that I generate from, where does that traffic go? Just start to understand those patterns. When you understand those patterns, take 10% of your top of the funnel money, spend it bottom of the funnel. I think the solution to everyone talks about the superfan dilemma, but what they really mean is how can we make more money out of D2C? Yeah, that's what they're really saying. Yeah, really, really. I think that's what it comes down to. And probably, if that's the case, the solution to the superfan dilemma is find everyone who bought one thing last year and get them to buy two things this year. And if you were doing that, you'd start with the people who bought one thing last year. You wouldn't start anywhere else. You'd start there. Yeah, okay, let's go and look at. So experiment like that, I think, and learn. Exercise some slightly different muscles.
All right. Well, with a prescription for exercise for us all, we can wrap it up there. So thank you all very much. I'll put links to all of you and your respective work beneath the podcast, as well as Simon's original piece that kicked all this off. But for now, Keziah, Robyn, Simon, Aaron, thank you very much.
Cheers,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. Thank you again to Aaron, Keziah, Robyn, and Simon for joining us and spilling the beans on their innermost thoughts around fan engagement and marketing. If you found that useful, please do share it on with someone else who you think will get something out of it. And I think there's something in there for everybody, to be honest. If you do want to get in touch, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me on joe@musically.com. And don't forget, we have a free weekly email called The Knowledge, which rounds up bits and pieces of all the best analysis, news, marketing insight, and so on from Music Ally. Sign up and impress your friends. Links to that are in the description, as well as links to Simon Scott's piece and some of the other resources that were mentioned through that podcast. All right, thank you very much for listening. I've been Joe Sparrow, you have been you, and until next time, a fond farewell.